Hey guys, it's Nav here. I welcome you back for our second episode on the webinar series, The Future of the C-Suite. What we're going to discuss in this whole series today, how the post-AI C-Suite leadership looks like. The roles are changing. Everything is changing top to bottom, left to right, right to left. All aspects of a business operating model are changing. And in this web series, we are looking at this from the C-suite perspective. Okay, what leaders have to change, how they have to keep up on their perspectives to be ready for the post-AI future. We are already living that future. We are going through that. We are building that together. Let me walk you through what we have discussed so far in this series, and then I'm going to give you a little brief about the conversation we are going to have today with the great leaders from actually the from the great C-suite experience from top-notch organizations. You're not gonna miss this episode today, guys. Let me share my screen and we'll do quick recap what we have done so far. Okay, in the previous episode, the state of strategic maturity. By the way, the great leaders, Bill Schmarzo, Scott Brinker, and Antonio Neto Rodriguez, we confessed that AI transformation, we are doing everything right. We are making mistakes. We are spending over. We are misallocating our resources. We have education gap. That's fine. But we are doing everything right in our capacity, in our best judgment, based on our experience and resources available to us. And I'll pull 88% of all leaders that McKinsey surveyed saying they are getting value from the AI transformation. They are doing it correctly, like we think we are doing, and we are doing actually. Like we are saying we are doing. We are among 88%. We are doing AI transformation correctly. On the other side, PwC have published a report saying 56% of CEOs have no idea where the AI investment is going. There is no revenue growth, there is no cost reduction, no tangible value. And that is what we call transformation theater. We are doing a great work in AI transformation. We have done implementation correctly. We have agents working on. We don't have impact on the balance sheet, the real profit and loss influence. So Richard Soller in 70s have given a remark saying, all that billions of dollars invested in the tech sector in 60s and 70s have no real tangible attribution towards productivity of humans. And we are doing the same thing in 2020s with AI. Are we learning from history or not? The money we are spending on AI investment right now and not getting any value. If you have invested $10,000 on AI initiative and 6 months later you see there is no value and you killed that initiative and started another investment and doing another thing with AI experiment, that $10,000 is actually stuck in your AI loop. And we call it AI yield crisis. Because you don't know how you're going to recover that. You have to put extra efforts, extra value in another program to actually retrieve that 10,000 spent on another investment to look good on your balance sheet. That's the problem. Miscalculated spend on AI is actually contributing to AI yield crisis, and this is set to grow $383 billion by the end of 2026. And that is what we're going to discuss, how C-suite leaders can fix this at their end. So there is no yield crisis, there is actually AI yield. In the episode first on strategic maturity, Antonio said there is an execution overload traps organizations. We are starting more programs than we are closing them. Means workload is increasing over time. Scott says, have your tech stack robust, but that is not the key here. The key is you should prioritize all those touch points that bring revenue. That is your revenue stream that brings cash to the business, because it's cash that fuels your organization and keeps your business running, and that comes from customer. So focus on those touch points which actually drives revenue stream. And the Bill Schmarzo says, never evaluate data or tech in isolation. Value requires measuring direct impact on business outcomes. Don't just focus on everything, focus on where the real value is. Start with the value and then program everything and backtrack towards your activities. So I call it fear factor. FOMO, education gap, education with AI. You don't have to be agent developer to know AI. You still have to see and understand how and what it can do for you. You also need to understand what you don't know, so you have to keep educating yourself. alignment gap. What exactly matters to you and what activities you are doing. They are not aligned. Because of that FOMO and education gap, we are just keep moving forward in the race to compete with others because our competitors are in the same race, our partners are in the same race, customers are more educated than ever. So we are just moving forward without planning it well. So there is an alignment gap with our actual impact areas and our activities. And finally, the roadmap void. You got to know what your North Star is. You need to define your North Star. And that's exactly what one of our guests emphasized on. You have to have a North Star. And with that North Star, you will know where to go and then how to reach there. Google Maps, having an app on your phone doesn't take you anywhere if you don't know what your destination is, right? It can give you path, but you have to drive yourself. You have to plan going there and still have to have your destination. Okay, with that, I'll move forward and introduce you to the panel today. For the episode Integration Mandate, we have Rhona Bradshaw, Russ Finney, and Scott Berg, great leaders from the industry. We're going to discuss how C-suite can blend different departments together. CFO, CMO, CIO, CTO. I mean, they all have their own teams, they have their own goals, priorities, budget, but sometimes they work in silos. And that is what the traditional way of working is not letting them move fast enough in this AI transformation. That's exactly what we're going to discuss today. We're going to discuss how these different leaders can understand each other's goals, blend together their vision, and have shared accountability towards real outcome. Outcome is the focus here, and beating that AI yield crisis phenomena where like money is being drained, because even if we are working great, the money is being spent, and in those chasing speed aspect that we are losing that race, and money is what matters. We're going to discuss today. So let's welcome our panel today. Welcome Rhona, welcome Scott, welcome Russ. The integration mandate, the topic today. We have seen the CMOs, CIOs, and revenue officers, CFOs, all they have their own positions, their goals, their targets, their teams. But at times we have seen there are silos also because of their own priorities, and then they tend to share data but not programs. And my perspective today is, Scott, I want to ask you to start with the conversation today about from CMO and go-to-market perspective. We have been dealing with this way of working for a very, very long time, and that's been working at times. And this transformation for the last 5 to 10 years, breaking silos had been the agenda a lot in the programs and in the organizations. But with this AI transformation, when agentic AI is also blending into the operating models across the organization, how success is going to be measured today and later on? What is your perspective on GTM metrics and the success economics on the organization? Like how success should be measured now? Based on efforts, based on results, outcome. What is your take on actual new way of working on the marketing side?
I mean, this has been the question, right? That's faced and haunted marketers since the dawn of time, right? How are you measured, and how does that align? I mean, 60% of CEOs still think of marketing as a cost center, right? That's a challenge. It continues to be a challenge, and this is nothing new. I think this is the time and the opportunity, though, to be able to integrate a number of things together. Let's look at how marketing is judged against the rest of the organization, right? If you look at the CFO function, right, those guys are interested in really bottom line, net profit, and cost management. And the rest of the world worries about the top line, right? And sales is worried about the top line. Where does marketing fit into that, right? You've always still got the same issues with marketing and sales and who's taking credit for what when it comes to pipeline, when it comes to a lot of those different things, right? So, how do you align the metrics? Look, I think that there's a couple things. One is there is no consistency in metrics because just what you said, each group has its own set of metrics that it's putting in place, but none of them seem to be tied together. And I've been talking to CMOs about this and CEOs and boards, right? And that's one of the questions I ask is the company moving forward? Most of them all say, no, we've got all these multiple metrics to be able to make this thing happen. So I think you've got to start to align how marketing integrates into those particular functions. Is it designed and utilizing AI for retention purposes? Is it acquisition? Is it lifetime value? What is that? And where does it fit within the parameter of what everybody else is doing from a sales perspective to a product management perspective, from a finance perspective? So it's integrating those things together, which we have not done a good job of in the past. Let's just be
Yeah.
honest with it. It's now time to make that change, especially with AI and the analytics that are involved. You can now start to get a much better idea as to marketing's performance within that and ensuring that the metrics are integrated. But if they're not integrated now, they're not going to get integrated later. So now's the time to start to put that one foot forward to make sure that it happens.
Yeah, one of those diagnostics issue that we identified in the previous conversation, Jason Lecon, a great revenue and marketing leader, he mentioned that the the worst transition in this pipeline is when marketing creates a lead and sending it a pipeline, and sales drop the ball without having enough information about that lead, and then they blame the lead was bad. So this is the worst example in the marketing and sales conversation in the pipeline. And this is from marketing perspective, they generated leads, so they are successful on the agenda, on their goals. But sales doesn't understand that lead well because of the data issues, because of the coordination problems. And if the data is shared, then metrics and success should be shared as well here. And sales need to have enough information. How they do it, it depends on the top, like how they flow the coordination and collaboration down below into their teams, right? And in that perspective, uh, do you think metrics should be changed as well? Because number of leads generated, traffic driven to the website, these are good metrics. At least it gives you the pulse check on the team's performance. But for the outcome basis, from the end result basis, from the growth perspective, do you see that metrics should be seen differently?
I think I don't think the metrics need to be changed. I think it's who sees the metrics, right? Each one of those metrics is important for a different reason. But it seems that marketers continue to go to the board and talk about MQLs, cost of acquisition, number of impressions that they're getting, things that nobody cares about above the marketing department, right? Board of directors are concerned with lifetime value. Or at least that's where they should be having their concern, is at the lifetime value area of the function itself. So I think that it's not that those other metrics go away, it's how they get integrated and discussed in the future, as well as shared metrics, which typically never happen between marketing and the rest of the functions. So I think you've got kind of a number of different things that need to take place, but I'm not sure you have to completely throw out some things. I think you add some things in, certainly. But again, I think it's how you present it and who you present it to is probably more important than anything else at this point.
Yeah, that's right. Your point about marketing as seen as a cost center is a big one. And I have observed that too. I mean, CEOs are not very confident about the value that marketing teams are delivering over last couple of years. And that's been published by Gartner as well. Let's talk to Russ right now about AI GTM combination. Russ, from your perspective, and what Scott is saying about the real value of marketing is underrated. Marketing can build customer perception, can drive revenue, and can create huge pipeline for sales. But that coordination is missing between marketing and sales, and then leads are dropping, and then the blame game starts, and it all gets down to like data driven gaps or misalignments in both teams. What do you think about how can AI help solve this problem so that marketing and sales collectively deliver results and they support each other rather than competing with each other when things go wrong?
Yeah, that's a very good question. By the way, it's a super exciting time for marketers, and the opportunity that AI is presenting is incredible. And in our school, when at UT Austin, when ChatGPT first got released, the professors that were all over it, that were the most excited about it, were our marketing professors. I found that to be very interesting. I'm an MIS professor, but it was the marketers that were waving their hands saying, "Hey, this is gonna be big. This is gonna be very powerful for business." And now here we are 4 years later, and this thing is just expanding and growing and getting more sophisticated. So, since I'm a professor and we try to break things up and study them and be kind of categorize things, we've really laid this problem out into two dimensions. So, one dimension is really big companies, huge multinational or global companies. And then you've got medium-sized companies and you got little companies. So that's one dimension. And then the other dimension is in marketing, there's kind of traditional mass marketing. So that's all demand generation. So when you walk into a grocery store to buy toothpaste and you walk to the toothpaste aisle and there's 1,000 brands of toothpaste in
Yeah,
front of you.
it's always confusing.
Yeah, a marketer wants you to be able to quickly find the branding, the color, you're looking all back and forth and there it is, there's that thing, and then you grab it.
Yeah.
So that is still the way it is, but AI is going to help that too. The other dimension of it is online marketing, where you're converting people right there, through maybe through social media. They see a product, you take them over, and they can transact. And there's gigantic opportunities for that. Both use cases uh, have opportunities. So let's go a little bit maybe through some of those and how this is going to impact the C-suite. So if you're a small company and you're kind of traditional small company, your employees, you may not have a separate marketing and sales. That silo may be one big silo. We're just selling stuff. And so you've got somebody that's worried about all that. You don't really have too much of a ownership issue across that functionality. Medium-sized businesses, things start separating,
Yep.
and that's where the issue could come in. The very large companies, multinational, especially big multinational brand companies, they tend to have very organized, siloed functions, and then having those functions share things or give up things, it's very tough. It's very bureaucratic, and that's really going to be the challenge of the C-suite is with all this new technology, I can't run a traditional, brand awareness demand generation thing. I've got to get to where if they're doing social media, I need to know what those customers look like. I need to be able to target them inside of social media. Most marketing is done social media now. It's not so much TV. So AI is going to be able to help identify where's my eyeballs so that I can get my brand awareness out there. And I can't do that without a lot of information from the other uh, sales groups, operations groups. And then I need the technology group CIO to be able to enable all that.
But to the point of CMOs to justify the real value that CEOs are doubting about the outcome on profit and loss statement in terms of revenue growth or cost reduction. So to your point, like AI can definitely help you project your marketing campaign correctly by understanding customers and by aligning those offering to those customer sentiments that right way at scale, AI can definitely help on that aspect. Uh, but within the organization, into reporting structure or to the C-suite for across department collaboration between different C-suite members, do you see any kind of intersection with AI that can help that group in the C-suite coordinate better and uh, and create pipeline in a better and coordinated way? So one of the other thing we discussed in the previous episode when Jason mentioned the biggest problem in the funnel is right now handoff marketing generated leads uh, to sales, and sales doesn't understand it correctly, and then they drop that lead and flagging it as unqualified lead or a bad lead, and it's totally because of the data mismatch between two teams. Okay. If we are talking at scale on this scenario, I mean, companies are losing a lot of opportunities because of this underlying gap between two teams. And where do you see, not just between marketing and sales, but also at all groups within the C-suite leaders, that can be sorted out using AI, any aspect that you can put light on?
Right. So I mentioned the two different scenarios that we look at. So the mass marketing scenario, and then the online marketing with conversion to transaction scenario. All of those things have AI opportunities. So the AI can look, especially in the online side, uh, it can score intent.
Yeah.
What does this look like an intentional thing that's happening here? It can also uh, qualify a lead, as you mentioned, and I'm sure that's going to happen. It's going to be major.
Yeah.
But where it's gets really interesting is on the fly discounting, you know, or on the fly bundling. Anyway, and we kind of already see it like in Amazon, it throws things at you. People that bought this bought this. So maybe upselling or that sort of thing. And if you look at it from the AI, like in the background of what AI is doing here, it's pattern matching. So this kind of person, this kind of need that's bought this stuff in the past, anyway, they're very, very highly likely to be interested in this next thing. Okay, a marketer that's just doing mass market demand generation, to appropriately be able to funnel people through, they need to be further down the funnel. And that's where the C-suite implications start coming in. So just generating demand is it's great. It's great. But you're not going to really precisely target and transact like you can if you get further down, not only with your marketers, but also further up with your salespeople. So I don't see it as a one-sided problem. I see it as salespeople have to go up the funnel and marketing people have to go down the funnel. And then you've got more of a holistic ownership. And the terminology I hear a lot is value owner. So that you become a value owner of your total go-to-market pipeline, up and down.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
That's true. That's great. Seen a study by Gartner that published last year. They say like over 90% of CEOs have no to low confidence on the existence of CMO role. And I want to bring this conversation to you, Rhona. Like, do you agree with this aspect that marketing is seen as a cost center and CEOs are not very confident about CMO role? What's the core problem here? Why marketing is not able to justify their existence, and how to address that?
I would say yes, it's 100% a cost center because of the way in which we think about it. We think about it, you get a budget. The budget is to purchase advertising. The advertising is to drive demand. Therefore, all in how we think about marketing is very traditional and very old school, quite frankly. And I think part of the problem that's tied to the stats that you just mentioned from a CEO perspective is I'm not sure that many CEOs today quite understand how to leverage marketing as part of the overall ecosystem upon which their C-suite should be built. So if I step back completely, I think to myself, part of the challenge here is that the C-suite themselves are not galvanized behind common set of goals, ambitions, targets, strategy. They are individual people with individual roles who are there to lead their verticals and to deliver upon a certain thing. And I think part of the challenge is that as the needs from a customer perspective have moved forward and the needs from a business perspective have moved forward, especially in the context of needing to find more ways of adding value, of reducing cost, but yet growing revenue at the same time and maintaining a brand. The way in which we think about the roles that people play at the C suite has to change. And I'm not too sure that's changed in a manner that allows the marketing aspect of it to evolve in a way. And the examples I would give you are that when you think about the roles that we now see popping up in the C suite, chief growth officers, chief digital officers, chief experience officers, chief customer officers, these are roles that have evolved out of the need for a much more horizontal, much more integrated perspective on what the customer needs, but also what the business is requiring. And these are roles that are effectively blurring the lines between, websites and platforms, technology, revenue generation, sales, and marketing. And instead of considering how do we evolve the people that we've got and the outcomes that we are asking them to drive towards, we're adding in new people into the mix, which is continuously blurring the lines, but I think also shrinking the traditional marketing factor. And the world of the brand as a standalone entity is no longer sufficient enough, which leads you to the question you asked Scott around metrics. It leads them to a space where their metrics are isolated and very much outdated in the context of what people are defining as success factors to see what's driving growth, but also ways and means in which the other people of the C suite can connect and then essentially jump off. I always think of it as we should be a relay team. Each person on the C suite should understand their role that they play and how they have to feed off to the next person. And it's only when the collective passes the line that the success is delivered. And I think as we add people in, but also as we train people and as people evolve in their own development cycle, I think we haven't recognized that the tradition of the CMO equally needs to evolve with the people that we're choosing. It can't be just someone that was a great creative officer anymore. It needs to be someone that has a technical bend and someone that has a financial understanding, because you start to really see that actually we need the CMO in itself to grow and evolve. We need the people that are doing those roles to evolve, but we also need the broader context of how the C-suite has been positioned to also grow. And therefore, you need the CEO and the board to recognize that it's not good enough to have this standalone entity. And therefore, it just perpetuates this cost orientated perspective, I think, that people just have on an ongoing basis.
So, Rona, do you think, when these new roles you mentioned are being introduced in and deployed in the C-suite, the CMO role, the the territory of CMO is reducing?
I think the role that the CMO has to play, the needs are changing. And if the CMO that's in place, the individual in place, isn't able to evolve with those changes, become more financially orientated, become more technically orientated, understand how they've got to evolve their thinking around digital marketing, etc. If that person is traditional in how we've always thought about marketeers, I think that does mean that they will become smaller in the space because effectively they're up against people and roles that are much more um they're just much more generic. They're much more of generalists. They're much more capable of speaking to multiple things in multiple ways and then identifying how to connect the dots. So I think the traditional role starts to get much smaller because it's just not where people are looking for the value, and it's not where people are looking for the transformation.
And there is a new role, the
Yeah.
chief AI officer as well.
Chief AI. I mean, and if you think about all of these things, like as a chief digital officer, my role could be very technically orientated, could be very customer experience orientated. I have an element of marketing that I've got to play with because I have all of the digital channels in my space. So I think about demand, I think about advertising, but I also have to think about the platforms. I've got to think about the financial aspects because of the capital that we're spending or the OPEX that we're reducing. And so I think because those new roles that are coming in, you see that with the chief AI officer coming in, you see that with the chief growth officers coming in or revenue officers, they're seeking something far more than just the kind of singular perspective. And I think because of that, you then end up with a lot of people bumping up against each other, a lot of challenges, because people are trying to find their space and how they can actually be connected, but also impactful at the end of the day.
What do you think about fractional roles? Those are on the boom right now.
Fractional roles in sets of like how people are
Fractional
doing it across the
CMO,
board.
fractional CMOs, and
Yeah.
fractional
Look,
C-suite
I
roles.
think there's a role for fractional, quite frankly, because I think there's a lot more of smaller organizations in need of really strong people with a lot of great experience. And so I think there's a great way of learning and adding more value through the fractional space. And I think it's also a great way of developing as an individual because you start to see a lot more of the 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 needs of the business as a fractional CMO or CDO or CFO because you have to just play in different industries and you're dealing with smaller organizations as well. So I think there's a lot to be said for it. And I think ultimately the key is like as individuals, we have to always be learning. We can't just assume that we did our degrees, we did our masters and we know it all. The world has changed so much that we all have to figure out how to become more technical, become more financially astute so that we can be a part of the conversation and be at the table with that relevancy that we can bring.
Yeah, C-suite is just getting bigger uh, in in terms of number of seats on the table right now, and it might be something that we need to look at again because again when we talk about like the core teams on the program for the mission critical areas, like we tend to have teams smaller so that there are less decision makers and less conflicts and there is focus and vision. And if C-suite is overwhelmed with so many information and information providers, uh, that could be something that we should flag as well for consideration.
Yeah, I do think so. I do think, though, back to my beginning point, I do think it starts with the CEO understanding what they're trying to accomplish and how they want each of those roles to play. I do think it's about the board understanding that these roles are evolving and that they can't just enable, to Scott's earlier point, to have someone come in and talk about impressions and branding, but they have to understand how the whole piece comes together as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Rona. Scott, I want to turn over back to you on the priority side. Uh, if you want to pick in this integrated alignment of the C-suite leaders, like what are those priorities that you should mention for them to consider? What are those um, programs that you would suggest the new leaders to start for direct influence on the profit and loss? How to look at it?
Yeah, I think that there's, the programs, to Roma's point, if you're trying to integrate them right horizontally, that's a completely different type of program than it is within the function itself, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, for instance, like let's just talk about the marketing function itself. I think the areas where the biggest benefit is going to come from as it relates to utilizing AI and the integration associated with it is going to be things that are going to be revenue oriented. Right now, marketing is focusing basically solely on cost reduction, right? How do I decrease the cost of my production? How do I eliminate agencies? How do I eliminate people? That's what you hear about, right? But there's not much conversation about how are you generating top line revenue or bottom line profit. I mean, it's not there. So, I mean, I think things that you've got to start to think about is high level segmentation. It's now in the hands of individuals to be able to do segmentation. They used to have to be farmed out to data scientists to actually do that in an AI model. So call it RFM segmentation, right? That you can utilize. Win back programs, um, service call analysis. What's working with services? What's not working with services? Right? Where are you getting people that are dropping out of the funnel? Battle cards. There's hundreds of them, right? So I think you've got to start to pick and choose the ones that make most sense for you, but again, align it to as closely as possible to the goals of whatever that function is. And again, marketing is so tightly aligned to sales. I think that those programs need to be designed to align with sales and not be done out of the realm of sales. I'll give an example, right? RFM segmentation, recency, frequency, monetary value segmentation that was done back in the 50s, right? And now has continued to gain momentum. The best way to implement that is not to implement it just for marketing so that marketing can segment out and send out stuff and all of that. The best way to implement that is to actually build the company's foundational segmentation, marketing and customer segmentation off of RFM. Now everybody's aligned as to what the customer looks like, right? Who we're going after from an acquisition perspective, from a retention perspective, et cetera. And so you have some alignment. That also allows alignment up to the board, right? That you now have something that you can talk to the board about as relates to lifetime value, et cetera. So I think you've got to start small and then start to grow it from there.
So from RFM analysis, Scott, when it is done correctly, when it is implemented at the right cadence, it can give us great information about segmentation, probability score on the growth, the propensity models, and all those things. Rhona, from your digital aspect, I want to turn it back to you on. You have played CCO at Comcast. Big responsibility, both B2B, B2C. What is your take on having such kind of analysis and how seriously they are taken um, from your experience for decision making and data driven budget planning and program execution?
It is the bedrock of every decision that's been made. I mean, if really, so I studied marketing as a kid, and uh, as I've evolved my career, it's become necessary for me to become much more of a data orientated person than I've ever thought that I would have to, quite frankly, because the conversation behind every decisions that we're having is always down to the fact that what does the data tell us? How is it going to generate more outcomes? How long will it take for payback? What's the conversation in terms of how much this will need to grow over the course of time? And then what's the results that we're getting? How is it performing? And if those measurements, a little bit to Scott, your point around impressions, um, multi-click attribution, if they are not done in a way that are tied to those financial metrics, then actually you become quite irrelevant. So it really is a core part of all of the conversations that are happening. You end up becoming much more linked to the financials and the conversations around financials, even in terms of the capital you're spending and what you're doing, then you are actually linked to the creative or the experiences being created, because it has to hit that bottom line at the end of the day. That's where the decisions are coming from.
Yeah. Scott has recently shared with me offline about that AI driven RFM analysis and all the playbook around it. And with your permission, Scott, I want to share that with our audiences as well. And that's a great information and tool to look at for everyone. Okay, let's talk about between marketing and sales leadership right now. You mentioned like both departments work very closely, had been working, but we have discussed, as I mentioned previously in our diagnostic conversation, the first episode of this series, where the biggest problem that we have right now is between marketing and sales related to the funnel, and that's where the revenue stream is, and that's where the broken links are as well. Okay. And with AI, when like there are a lot of hallucinations, a lot of dependency on the technology been increasing, where do you see it can go even worse, or how can we fix it if we can using this technology can fix it?
Yeah, I think there has to be the the alignment on targets and goals and responsibility.
Yeah.
Marketing can't just say, "Hey, we'll generate a bunch of leads or we'll generate a bunch of pipeline."
Yeah.
They need to be able to say, "Hey, guess what? We're going to generate this type of pipeline, right? Which is what sales is defined of what they want, and going through the funnel of that, X amount is going to drop here, X amount is going to continue down the funnel, etc. And with an average potential price point or sales opportunity of X dollars, if you do everything right from the segmentation perspective, etc." You know, I've always said that um, marketing and sales have a love-hate relationship. We love them and they hate us. You know, it's one of those situations where responsibility many times gets in the way.
Mm.
Someone says they're responsible and then they don't deliver, right? Now, again, that's business. Every single day, it's how do you course correct and move forward with it. However, you can't also just throw your hands up in the air and go, "Well, I couldn't do it, couldn't make it happen." And to your point earlier about sometimes sales not picking up leads, I will give an example for everybody. When I first went into a company that I ended up working for, one of the first things I found in the first month was that sales had dropped 3,000 leads from marketing. 3,000 leads. That's not only terrible, it's criminal in my opinion, right? But their whole point was, guess what? You know what? They probably weren't worth anything anyway. Well, how do you know that, right?
Yeah.
The other side of that is, look,
The
sales,
bad lead.
exactly. They're leads, right? So you should be going through them to find out if there's value there. But on the other side, right? Sales comes back and says, well, you're not giving me the right leads. Okay. Yeah, if marketing isn't giving you the right leads, then shame on the marketing department. We need to take the accepted responsibility associated with that if we're sending them the wrong leads. Now, again, how do those things merge together? Sales tell us then what is the identification of the correct lead for you. So if you provide that to us, then we'll put it through the funnel, etc. But if you don't deliver, that's when marketing then tends to get itself into a quagmire where we want to be a part of the process. We want to have shared metrics. We talk about all that stuff, but only when it benefits us. It's that may be a point that other marketers listening to this may completely disagree with, but in every single company that I've gone to, there always tends to be this lack of confidence and responsibility in the marketing department, right? Um, Based on many times CEOs and sales, etc., don't believe the metrics. And they don't believe how you came up with the metrics. Um, so again, to your point earlier, and point that you and I were discussing, which is, 60% of um, CEOs think of marketing as a cost center.
Yeah.
If you're in that bucket and you're not generating revenue, it's tough to crawl out of that bucket unless you're highly aligned with everybody else and aligned in the process of how things get done and
Yeah.
how things generate revenue.
Yeah, because when CMOs need budget for their programs, and CFO is going to ask the same question every time, how much revenue it's going to generate. right?
Yep.
They're not talking language of leads or traffic or engagement. They're gonna look at like, okay, how much are we expecting to make out of this investment?
Exactly. And how much money, if I give it to you, marketing,
Yeah,
how much of that money are you going to be able to generate?
correct,
Right.
correct.
So, I mean, I've sat across the table from, um, you know, a high level executive at a company. Um, and rightfully so, the executive says, I'm going to give you multi-million dollars. I'm going to give you a huge chunk of money, incremental to your budget. But how much are you going to generate for it
Mm-hmm.
on top line pipeline? How much are you going to be able to drive to the bottom line based off of what your estimations are? So what can I see on a 1 year cycle, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year cycle, right? So that's a fair question. Absolutely 100% fair. You can't just come in as marketing and go, guess what? We're going to generate 20,000 leads off of it. It doesn't work that way. Business doesn't work that way. It's how does that generate to the bottom line of the company itself?
Absolutely. Yeah, programs should not be designed for, okay, let's run an event.
Exactly.
What's the point?
Exactly.
Right?
When things become tactically oriented, that's the way you think of marketing, is you think of it as an organization that, well, they do events, right? They send out an email, they run that advertising. They don't think about it as an integrated portion of all of those tactics, bringing together a full force funnel management or full force drive of brand. They think of it tactically oriented, which is a big challenge to try to change that mentality. But it starts at the board level and at the CEO level, in their understanding associated with that, and then holding marketing accountable to large scale metrics like lifetime value, for instance.
Yeah. There are a lot of topics between marketing and sales and CFO and revenue officer that I would like to discuss with you from your experience. But since we are going through AI transformation, and then you have been working a lot around AI and you're building tools and doing research and publishing on LinkedIn as well, I would like to get your take on like what leaders should learn, educate themselves, because I call a fear factor in the C-suite on this AI transformation, like FOMO, education gap, alignment gap, and roadmap void. And I want to discuss this education gap with you right now, how leaders can fill that education gap that is necessary to learn to be ready for this post-AI era.
I think the first thing that a CMO needs to do is to basically be the dumbest guy or gal at the table. You need to bring in the smartest people, right? And have them teach you, your own staff, right? External consultants. Don't try to learn it on your own by sitting there and going, I'm going to take this course, I'm going to take that course, which I continue to see out there. How do I write a prompt? How do I do this? How do I do that? You've got to look at it from a bigger perspective, right? Given the seat that you sit in. And how does AI impact all sorts of other things? How does it impact manufacturing to services to et cetera? And then how do you integrate associated with that? So education wise, it's bring in the smartest people. Don't try to learn it yourself, experiment. And I experiment a lot with a lot of the AI engines. Um, but in order to get the baseline as to where you can utilize it and understand where you need to focus your investment into AI, you need to look to the people that are the experts associated with that and your people sitting around the table. But always ask the question, what am I getting for this?
Hmm.
This AI, if we go do this, what is that going to equal from a revenue perspective or from a cost reduction perspective, et cetera? But right now, everybody, again, as we've spoken about earlier, thinks about it from a cost reduction perspective. CFOs love that.
Yeah.
They love that all day long, right? Oh, you reduced my costs down, right?
Yeah.
You were able to get rid of these agencies. Well, I would assume then that if you've been able to get more efficient, that you don't need as many people. That's exactly what they're going to say to you at the end of the year
Yeah.
when you start looking at budgets again. Well, you told me that you implemented all of this different software that could do X, Y, and Z because you came to me and asked me for capital budget to be able to do that. I gave that to you. You've done it. Where's the efficiencies if you keep the same people? That's a challenge, and that's the reason why I keep coming back to sit at the table, be the dumbest guy at the table or gal sitting at the table, have them tell you where the opportunities are. Think about it more from the perspective of bottom line and top line revenue.
That's a great vision to have expert on the table and give them a task to directly influence the bottom line and the top line. Those are the extremes, and then everything in between is actually filling those gaps and connecting those dots. That's a
Exactly.
great way to look at it, because that's what matters the most. Okay, what's the revenue increase or cost reduction?
Because at some point in time, right, you're going to get to this point where the CEO and the CFO are going to go, okay, what have you done for me lately? Right? You reduce the expenses down. The company thinks of marketing as a cost center, not a revenue generation center. That's the reason why they keep coming back in and saying, reduce your cost, reduce your cost, reduce your cost.
Yeah.
Right? You got to shift the conversation away from that to revenue generation, profitability, customer acquisition, customer retention, increase in lifetime value. Those are things that then show the revenue and generation aspect of marketing versus focusing like CEOs and CFOs, et cetera, on the cost side of marketing.
That's a great way to look at this same thing from another dimension, because it's all about mindset, like cutting cost or revenue growth. Um, I mean, you remove a team from the organization and suddenly the cost is reduced. But this is not growth. This is not really a better AOP.
Exactly. And a great example of that is analysis I did recently, which was on data hygiene. Okay. I took data sets from 4 different areas, right? Had them created with absolutely dirty data that couldn't fit together, right? I ran that through AI and I said, AI, I want you to clean this data for me, standardize this data, and deduplicate this data. Now, that's always been a huge challenge with marketing systems. So, with your Marketos of the world, et cetera, to your Salesforce systems, to your finance systems, to your service organization systems. You get all of these systems, and none of them have the same data, right? Or it's dirty data. Now, think about it for a second. If you bring all of that together and you clean that data, there is a huge cross company benefit associated with that. Massive from a cost reduction perspective, from an increase in customer satisfaction perspective, and from a revenue perspective. Because when you've got clean data, you can do better analysis, right, to determine in an RFM segmentation manner who's your best customers to your worst customers, where you should segment and where you should drive to sales.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because it always comes down to, right, they and I would say I've always found this in my career that, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your revenue comes from 20%. The only thing
10%.
I would say is it's typically 90% comes from 10%.
Wow.
Many times, trying to find the 10%, which is the golden ticket right
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
finding them is the most challenging thing because they could be spread through other systems that you can't get access to. But again, it's cost reduction in that situation, efficiencies, and revenue generation. You
Mm.
get all 3 of them, all in doing one piece of analysis,
Mm.
and AI can do it for you.
And do you think, like from your previous recommendation to have an expert in the room and guide you to influence the bottom line and the top line, and do you see in that aspect like fractional roles are really necessary here before making big commitments?
Exactly. I absolutely think what Rona said about the benefit of fractional roles is um, is outstanding, frankly. I think she hit the nail on the head with that. Um, again, you get big company experience typically, within a medium to smaller size organization itself. And those people can come in with these ideas and opportunities. The key is when you call it a fractional CMO, is that once the fractional CMO goes away at some point in time, to make sure that those processes, those programs, et cetera, are integrated in deeply into the marketing organization and the company itself so that they don't go away when a fractional leadership role leaves. That's the only thing you've got to kind of worry about, is to ensure that, because those are, tend to be, a select time period commitment, that a company makes for a fractional CMO. But I do think that it's important to do it and move it forward. And I guess you could bring in consultants as well. Although, and I'm sure that the consulting world will jump all over me and beat me, like a wet noodle, so to speak. I haven't found, in many respects, consultants to be able to bring together programs and initiatives, right, and make them sustainable.
They see
Right.
work as a project.
Exactly, and that's a whole other subject for another podcast, right? But in AI, you have to be able to make those initiatives part of the DNA of the company. The reason why is that all you got to do is click a button and have AI go do a bunch of stuff, right? And then you get caught back into what Rhona was saying,
Yeah.
which is, hey, marketing's known for doing an event, doing this. Well, guess what? Now you're doing it with AI. I'm hitting a button and I'm making all sorts of fancy stuff come through, right? And it's more tactically oriented versus strategically oriented
Yeah.
in the execution associated with it.
Right. These are the great insights. Yeah. All right. It was a wonderful conversation with all of you, Rhona, Scott, Russ. Thank you very much for your time today. It's really wonderful. And I hope listeners will definitely take good value from this conversation and learn from it. Thank you.
So much.
Thanks, Rhona.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. That's a wrap of episode 2. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and have learned something that can help you solve problems at your work. And if you want to understand more, if you want to learn any of those solutions about problems that you are facing at your work, please DM me or leave your comments. I'll make sure I bring in the right people to discuss those problems in front of you so you can learn from them directly. And with that, I'm going to announce my next panel. We're going to stream on October 13th. Episode number 3, The Infrastructure of Scale. I hope to see you there as well.